and that's why we're organizing this webinar to hear voices, experiences, histories, knowledge, and approaches to climate change and food insecurity that are often excluded from academic and political considerations. The countries we will work with have a range of community-based practice from which we will learn from and enhance the role of this knowledge in local policy making. So this project is a structure and a partnership between academics and community organizations based in Antigua and Barbuda, Belize, Colombia, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico. There are the McChesney George Secondary School in Antigua and Barbuda, the Library of African and Indigenous Studies in Belize, the Racial Youth Organization in the archipelago of San Andrés, Colombia, the Bernard Lodge Farmers Association in Jamaica, the Fideicomiso of the Caño Martín Peña Community Land Trust in Puerto Rico. All the partners lead agricultural, legal, cultural, and educational projects that focus around climate change, food and land use with strong community participations. All the project partners have already worked with at least one of these applicants, and we are connected with this with this project, and we're constructing strong relationships with them. I will present each one of our presenters, which we want today to hear. We want to hear the voices of those that are that experience the injustice from climate change, persisting legacies of colonialism, enslavement, genocide, racism, exploitation, and who had the experiences, the voices, and the proposals. That's why we think that in the Caribbean, there are solutions that are dreamed and practiced by the people long time ago. The Caribbean is a birthplace of movements, putting forth an alternative. It's the birthplace of triumphant abolition struggles, of marriage and the self-liberation by the enslaved, of anti-colonial struggles, of collective land tenure, seed saving, cultural recuperation, where women, Black, Indigenous leaderships, in the ingenuity of farmers who have taken back land and seas for the poor and for the good of human dignity in the earth. So now we need that. We're in a crisis. COVID-19 brings us together more early than we think we could be. So that's why we decided to link this problem of hunger, the COVID-19 phenomenon, and this historical resistance and farmer-based propositions, reality, and solutions. So now we're going to present all the participants in this work that make part of a large movement for food sovereignty, and they fight against hunger, landlessness, and the depletion of fisheries across the region. Speaking today, we have 5 community organizers, activists who are fighting for a better and a more just way in Jamaica, Colombia, Belize, Puerto Rico, and Antigua and Barbuda. So we will begin with the presentations of all these leaders and organizations, followed by the questions. We're going to divide this webinar in 3 big questions. First of all, I will present every one of all our participants. First, Mr. Hugh Johnson. He's been a public relation officer of the Bernard Lodge Farmers Group. Then we have, he has been working in the Jamaican Agricultural Society, president of Small Business Association of Jamaica, vice president of the Cocoa Farmers. and has worked in some of the local farmers organizations. Then we have Krystal Geigel Ramírez. She's been involved in process of community organization. She's been member of the youth group Líderes Jóvenes en Acción, Leaders Youth in Action. It's an organization of 8 communities in the Caño Martín Peña in Puerto Rico. She's part of the community board member. We also have Chris Mori Alomar, actively involved in processes since he was 14, member of the youth group Leader Jóvenes en Acción, and former president of the Caño Martín Peña Community Board, also in Puerto Rico. From Belize, we have Andy Chuc. He is a Belizean Yucatec Maya cultural guardian, member of the 2-owned Master Hua Belong NGO, and he teaches to the younger generation Yucatec Maya about this culture and language of these people in Belize. We're happy to invite here young leaders and indigenous leaders from this great Caribbean. We also have today Mr. John R. Mussington. He's a biologist and environmentalist, leader in, he comes from Antigua and Barbuda, leader in island organizations and support farming and land right causes. He actively promotes and develops policies that helps to conserve natural and built environments. And finally, we have today also Graybern Livingston Forbes from San Andrés and Providencia Archipelago, Colombia. He's co-founder of Youth Raizales organization of the San Andrés, Providencia, and Santa Catalina. He's been working in community training, and he trains on ethnicity, oral memories, socio-territorial and environmental conflicts of land, and also agroecology. He's coordinator of Bushbacks Initiative. He's restoring and helps restoring, organizing local people looking for food security and sovereignty, and helps revitalize those systems, these racial people's local agro-food systems. So these are our 5 participants which are invited today to speak, and we're going to organize this conversations in 3 big questions. First, we will ask to introduce. We're going to ask first our first participant, Mr. Hugh Johnson, to introduce himself and his collective work. We're going to let each one of our presenters in the same order to introduce them and help us know what's happening right now in every place, what's happening with the COVID-19, what it's happening with food access, water issues, food dependence on imports, health issues, and human rights. So it's a little bit, a lot of questions that are related, but it's important that we all know what's happening in each place right now. So please, Mr. Hugh Johnson, introduce yourself, please.
Catalina, Hugh Johnson, PRO, Bernard Lodge Farmers Group, I'm also the president of the Small Business Association of Jamaica, a director on the Jamaica Agricultural Society Board, and also vice president of the World Cocoa Farmers Organization. And most of all, a proud farmer. There are many challenges facing us in Jamaica. And as you have asked, I would want to touch on a few here. As it relates to the pandemic that is moving around in the world just now, it is a challenge, but it's also offers glorious opportunities, because for quite some time now, we as environmentalists and farmers have been lobbying government to take a more serious look on these environmental issues, how we treat food security. And somehow it did appear as if we weren't getting the requisite attention that was needed. But the COVID pandemic has forced a new look, a fresh look in this direction. So in all those challenges as it relates to lockdown to prevent the spread of this disease, and hunger has increased, we see it as a glorious opportunity to reset the dial as it relates to how we view our regional food security and how can we ramp up productivity through greater involvement of our small farmers and small holdings to have a more sustainable food supply and not to be so dependent upon imports for over 80% of our consumption need as it relates to our food. There are also other challenges that we have been facing around the region. We have realized that the challenges that each one of us face as a farmer, as a small operator, it's not unique to us. Hence, this collaborative effort to voice our collective opinion and forward push to get the governments of the region to understand that it cannot be business as usual, but the time has come for us to look pointedly at our own sustainability. Also, in that forward looking, we are asking for even greater emphasis to be placed on environmental issues, because as we would see, scientists for decades now have been telling us that climate change is real. It is not coming, but it is here with us. These small island states that are surrounded by the ocean, we face even greater challenges as it relates to our own sustainability and continuity in our existence. And to broaden that understanding, I would want to draw our attention to a UN Intergovernmental Panel Climate Change report in October of last year, which speaks to some of these pointed issues. This report highlights how the rise in global temperature links to increased pressure on fertile soil, risks jeopardizing our food security. And as we have always been saying, food security should be of grave concern to our policymakers, and we are inviting them to take greater look, greater effort, and to pool more resources to deal with those challenges that we may be able to overcome them collectively. The highlight of the report says, too few people, we believe, appreciate that the land plays a very important role in emitting and absorbing greenhouse gases. Hence, how land is used is a major causal factor in climate change. Land use is affected by human settlement, agriculture, deforestation, soil erosion, and those in turn affect the ability of the land to absorb carbon. The same report also shows that approximately 500 million people are living in the area that are experiencing degraded conditions and are most likely to be impacted by climate change. And that is approximately 7 out of every 1,000 persons that will be affected. The four key things that play a major role in the future of our food security are: one, the availability, access, utilization, and stability. The report went even further to show how global warming is a worthwhile endeavor. There were some commendable programs being affected by, climate change programs that is being implemented by the government of Jamaica. And we are therefore re-emphasizing that we must build on those to secure our future. And the irony of it is, for over 40 years, we have been at this, and we believe that enough is not being done in this regard because there's not that substantive drive, push, and effort to correct those ills. As it relates to the local condition that you have asked for, Catalina, I would want to say here that research has shown that the Jamaica food sustainability drive, or our food import, will only last for 2 months. And if we have to import 80% of all our food, can you imagine if, similarly to the COVID response lockdown on health equipment, if that should happen for food, it will be catastrophic. So for those reasons, I welcome this coming together, this collaboration, and hopefully when we would have completed this, our deliberation, for them to be shared with our stakeholders. And for that reason, I would like to make 3 recommendations that, coming out of this, we would like to develop a policy document for government to agree to as it relates to our sustainability and our food security. The second one is to look on a deeper engagement of corporations who we perceive to be a part of the land grab that is preventing sustainable cropping in order to ensure food security. And the third that I would like for us to arrive at is to engage the regional players, even an entity like CARICOM, to see how best we can find a way forward in helping to cement these our ideas that they may be of some relevance, benefit to ensure our food security. And I want to thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Hugh. Thank you. We will continue working on these proposals. and actions that are already taking place in each one of these places which we are connected today. We are going now to ask Krystal Geigel and Chris Murray Alomar to introduce themselves and their collective work in Puerto Rico. Also, we want to know what's the current situation now there, what's related to food access, water issues, what's happening with human rights issues and related with this COVID-19 phenomena. Thank you very much, Mr. Hugh.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, right. So I'm Chris Murray Lamar. I'm from Puerto Rico, also my partner, Krystal. We are both young leaders in action, part of the group LEHAC, which is based off in the communities of the Caño Martin Peña channel. Right? These are special communities, right? We have a lot of health issues, right? And throughout the years, we haven't been able to, well, I can't say it that way either. We've been getting progress done, right? But you know, it takes a lot of work. Also, we have done many community gatherings, as I think I would call them, to inform the people about measures we could take as residents in our own homes and communities, right? As in the current situation, I wouldn't say current situation as in start of COVID-19 and the whole pandemic, right? We haven't had an easy year since summer 2019. For example, beginning of this year, we also had the tremors throughout the island, right? So we got to keep in mind that our people has been pretty stressed out mentally and emotionally. And as in resources, as in, for example, food security, I don't know how to say it in English very well. Oh, my bad. Throughout the years, we have been trying to improve our agricultural market, I guess, because throughout the years, we have been getting a lot of pressure and been choking down to a limit where it's really hard to move certain projects, right? For example, well, I'm gonna take examples from now COVID-19. With the whole situation of COVID-19, we see a difference in interest. For example, when we think about food, people like their main option is the big supermarkets, the fast foods and all that, right? But what about our local farmers and all that? Let's see. It's not about closing our doors much to just make a way smaller doorway for us to work through, right? So we do have a lot of solutions for the community on a ground level, right? Between communities, we do have our main grid, but we still, well, at least me, I don't feel we have reached that maximum potential to get this on the whole, like throughout the whole island, right? We are getting work done, but we still gotta do more. Also about the human rights, we have been getting a lot of confrontations, I guess, because for example, our governor be giving out executive orders, right, which are sometimes contradictorio. I don't know, it goes against her own words or something she said before, right? So we have to work with their problems too, basically. One of our most recent examples too, right, since we're talking about the farmers market and all that stuff, they're taking their time to get work done. But for example, our yesterday, okay, I messed up. All right, I'll start that off again. Okay, throughout these days, there have been a couple of protests, especially today on May Day, right? Especially with this issue about food around the island, right? We're in the Caribbean, you know, it's a tropical place. We can basically grow anything and everything, right? But right now, at least 85% of our food comes from the outside, right? So in moments of crisis like this, where we're supposed to like help ourselves, we get, you know, we go off a slow start, right? And I don't know what else to say about this, but the government isn't actually flowing that right with us either, right? We have our issues in the past and all that and present, and we still have issues going on in the future. That's something about the actual situation. About acciones, well, got it in Spanish, about proposals and actions we've taken. My partner Krystal will actually talk about that. So I don't know how we do it with the.
Hi, I
Maybe.
hope that you guys can hear me. So, as my partner Chris Maury was saying, currently our country is fighting for all the people to have access to food. With this crisis, people have paralyzed the streets and they have set up food collection centers. And as my partner was saying, the government is taking the time to arrest the people in the street and is not taking responsibility in this crisis. Just yesterday, they arrested someone just for being in the street demanding food for our children. And today, people will be out with their cars demanding the rights during this crisis. Our organization has recognized that during this emergency, we have so many people that doesn't have access to food or face masks or any medical service. So what we're trying to do is that getting help from our farmers to also help all communities. And in addition to that, our organization is taking action and has organized to deliver food to our families, and we are working to provide to our community leaders so we can help all the communities. So during this crisis, what we have seen is that community organizations are taking the responsibility of the government. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Krystal. Yes, what we are seeing everywhere in the Caribbean, the Central America, is the solidarity-based organization of local leaders, the importance of local farmers, food and agriculture. So what we want is also to exchange this experience of solidarity in facing these hard problems on, for example, sometimes hard security politics that are taking place in our countries right now. So thank you for your experience, and we will continue talking about actions taken by grassroots organizations in different places. We're going to invite Mr. Andy Chuc. He's from Yucatec Maya, Yucatan Maya Cultural Guardian. Please, Mr. Andy Chuc, tell us a little bit about yourself, your collective work, what's happening right now there where you are, and related with this food access. Are you having water issues, health issues, human right issues? Thank you very much.
Well, first of all, I'm Malopkin, Titulaklesh. Amin Kabaye, I'm the Chuc. Good morning to everyone. My name is Andy Chuc. I am a member of the Yucatec Maya community in the country of Belize. And I am part of a non-governmental organization named Tonema Sewalon, which is for the preservation of the Yucatec Mayan culture, language, history. And we also think that through the preservation of our identity, our youth can reconnect with their indigenous identity and reconnect with the land, either planting or preserving it. COVID-19 have been something that have been affecting everyone in Belize, but there are some people that are having a more difficult time than others. It have been like over a month that the country have shut down, and the help of the government for many it is taking too long. Um, but I need to say thanks to the many non-governmental organizations in Belize that they have been helping the people with what they can, rice, chickens, beans. Also, our organization, Tonema Sewalon, have been one of the groups that have been trying their best to give, especially the elders that are not that don't have food here in the Corozal district. Now, this COVID-19 have affected the agriculture in Belize a lot. Um, the people have continued to produce food over the month, but nobody's buying. Why? Because people are not working, especially people that work on the Corozal Free Zone and the casinos, which are a place located between the Mexican and Belizean border. It has been a month that they are not working, and they are not getting help. And based on my experience working there, they win the minimal wage, which makes it difficult for them to save to buy food. So what farmers are doing, some farmers are lowering the price of their crops, lowering the price of meat, so they can sell it, because the people buying it have went drastically down. So some people are giving promotions. If you buy a certain amount of chickens or food, they will give you some free. So it have been affecting us economically. Also, there have been no rain falling for a month, so that is affecting also the crops. It have been recently yesterday that some rain have fallen, and we are having a other kind of problems beside COVID-19. For example, the forests are burning. We are having a lot of smoke. In my community, apart from the COVID-19, every time we wake up, whatever time of the night, you can smell. There's a lot of smoke, which is affecting, it can affect our lungs. So there's a lot of pollution created by a smoke. But I believe that this COVID-19 have been like an awakening for everyone, especially for us indigenous, because we have become too dependent of this system that is giving us trouble simply to help us. I believe that my recommendation would be that we start planting again, we start reconnecting with Mother Earth. Um, if we have a, a little yard, plant food, plant medicinal plants, which can be helpful for us and our family for a near future. Because I in my community, a lot of people have become too dependent of the government system, too dependent of the international sugarcane system, which makes it difficult for them, especially coming from a community who originally we were farmers, meaning that people used to plant and they used to live of their own crops. They needed no money. That was around the 1940s and 50s. They need no money. Whatever they need, they used to exchange it. So this transition from there to what we are right now, I think COVID-19 have shown us how vulnerable we have become by becoming too integrated to the Western society. I believe we should integrate without disintegrating in our culture. Also, when it comes to the policies, it was until yesterday, after a month, that the government became more flexible so people can come out, but it has to be with social distancing of 6 feet and with a mask. So it's a must that you need to use a mask. If you are fine outside without a mask, it will be over $5,000 that they will charge you. So these are difficult things because not everyone has a mask, and not everyone knows what material is good to create a mask so they can be protected. So I believe that this COVID-19 have have taught us a lot to everyone in Belize, because I know a lot of people that they have got zero help of the government, or the help have been taken over a month. And thanks to all those non-governmental organizations that they have been given to the people. Without them, I think things would have become really hard about the food insurance. Well, Belize have continued to produce even with the COVID-19. And I think at this point, Belize is one of the countries that, compared to the other countries in the Caribbean and even in Central America, we are at a better scenarios. We only had, I think, 18 people with COVID-19, and people have been recovering. It have been nearly 2 weeks, and they have not confirmed another case. So I think that comparing Belize to other countries, we are at a better situation, and hopefully things will become better. But still, there are a lot of people that will not be able to work. They are unemployed, and the help is really taking too long. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chuc. Yes, there are things that are common in all the Caribbean. This idea of planting again, this idea of try to see which seeds, which food security. That's really what people want. Well, this critics front an international food dependent system that happens all over the Caribbean. The lessons we are all having in this quarantine or confinement. COVID-19 is teaching us a lot, as you say. I want also to say hello to the mostly 50 participants we have now in our web, and we ask them to send their questions in the chat so we can later on ask our presenters these questions, and to try to send us also the place where you are right now in the Caribbean, to see how we can exchange these voices from different parts of the Caribbean. Now I'm going to invite Mr. John Mussington. He's from a Long Island organization, and he's already working in public policy and conservation on built environments and natural, and he has worked a lot on farming and land right causes. Mr. Mussington, tell us the current situation where you are right now, and what's happening with the COVID-19 there where you are. Are you having food access issues? I imagine problems with the historical food dependence, water issues, and perhaps human rights issues.
Hello, everyone. Hello, fellow panelists, brothers and sisters from the region, particularly El Canio Martin in Puerto Rico, Belize, Colombia. Now, what I want more than anything else to emphasize this morning to my fellow panelists and the wider world is that there is a definite link between the land, who owns and controls that land, and whether or not you can be secure under these circumstances of a climate crisis, as well as this recent pandemic crisis, whether or not we're able to survive these crises and have security. That's the message I want to point out in this short presentation to start off with. Now, to begin with, Barbuda. Barbuda is the sister island of the nation of Antigua and Barbuda. Many of you would have heard in 2017 that Barbuda was the first casualty in one of the strongest Atlantic storms in our living memory to hit. And how we survived that storm has lessons in terms of how we go forward, and the subject of this discussion this morning. Here in Barbuda, We're going on 2.5 to 3 years since that disaster. And what we are facing is that we have still not recovered, and we are now in the middle of another crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic. The thing is that we are coping, we are surviving, and we will get through as long as we do what is necessary. But in order to get through, there are some lessons that I want to share with everybody. Now, this Atlantic storm that hit us in 2017, we also saw that our brothers and sisters in Puerto Rico, they were impacted by Hurricane Maria. And in 2019, our brothers and sisters in the Bahamas, they were hit with Hurricane Dorian. And in both Puerto Rico and Bahamas, the casualties were great. So too was the impact on the economies. We are now facing a pandemic in COVID-19. The question of food security now comes to the fore. And what I want to point out is that when we talk about land, land is the basis of all resources, all economies. Everything that we do from an economic perspective is based on that land. Land represents resources. The other thing, which is a theme for this webinar we're having now, is sovereignty. Who owns and controls those resources? That is a very critical issue, because throughout history, what we have seen is that he who controls those resources will determine pretty much the fate of not only local communities, but the world. Because what we're facing today in terms of the climate crisis, and no doubt whether or not communities will be able to survive the pandemic, has a lot to do with sovereignty. Okay? So food security linked to that control of resources and the land, sovereignty. Now, I want to draw some parallel in terms of the experiences of us in Barbuda compared with those other two communities which I mentioned earlier, Puerto Rico and the Bahamas. Now, I want to put on the table that one of the reasons why Barbuda, a small community, 1,800, population of 1,800, 62 square miles, we survived, we came through that storm pretty much with just one casualty, okay? But what we also faced is a disaster after the storm, because there are some challenges which are created by persons who would wish to change what we have. Now, I will draw your memory back to the history of the region. Our region, we had people living here, but then we had contact with Europeans. In that, Christopher Columbus, he came. And one of the things you should note is that when he arrived, he decided that he's going to claim what he found to a foreign nation. Right there and then, he took over sovereignty. And we have seen the effects of that after 500 years in terms of what we suffered throughout. One of our biggest challenges coming through the disaster in 2017 and why we have not been able to recover is that we were faced with that same principle going on. Someone having different plans for the resources that we control. Because in Barbuda, coming through that period of enslavement, we came out of it with what we called common land ownership. The land in Barbuda is owned in common by the people of Barbuda. That is what is said in a piece of legislation dated 2007. Land shall not be sold. What that did for us is that it puts the wealth of our nation, the access to the resources, in the hands of the people first. After the disaster, there was a concerted effort to change that. So what we saw was a repeat of the things that took place during the colonization, where persons claim sovereignty. And that is why we have to fight. We continue that fight in terms of regaining and resisting that attempt to change the land ownership. Now, the peoples in Puerto Rico, when they were hit by that storm, they suffered a lot. So too the persons in Bahamas. And I want to put out there that one of the reasons there was that difference in terms of the impact compared to those of us in Barbuda was that our resources were still pretty much intact. The services provided by resources in good conditions helped to protect us from that storm. After the storm and the disaster, and what we're facing now with COVID, our access to resources and food, we will come through stronger because the people, the community, they have access to the marine resources, lobster, skunks, so we can do it ourselves. We have access to land where we can farm. And our biggest concern right now is to ensure that we maintain those controls. So in the COVID-19 pandemic, we're beginning to see a continuation of the injustice that we saw coming out of the hurricane disaster. The response nationally, when you listen to what is coming out in terms of reports, quarantine systems being put up, people being prepared for the pandemic, lockdown, and so on. What you will not hear is anything specific being done in Barbuda. The community of Barbuda, we have had to take the initiative and to do things for ourselves so as to give ourselves a chance to be able to withstand this pandemic. We do not have any cases of COVID-19 so far. We decided that as a community, because we have local government, the Barbuda Council is responsible for the day-to-day administration of the island. We took the initiative as a community to close our borders even before the national borders were closed. We got some pushback from the central government, but still we found that we had to do that in order to protect ourselves. At this stage, with the borders closed, we allow the movement of cargo and for emergencies. But we're in a precarious situation in that most of our food comes from outside. Now, there was a time in Barbuda when that was not the case. And some of the things that we have been doing over the past 10 years or so is to ensure our food security. Because this thing about climate change is real. The justice associated with the climate crisis is a real thing in that there's a lot of injustice. We did not create it, but we will suffer most from it. So starting in 2013, we started to take measures which will allow us to adapt to the climate crisis. We have engaged in terms of doing things which will change the technology in food production. So as far back as 2013, we pioneered aquaponics system between the secondary schools, the McChesney George Secondary and the Barbuda Research Complex. So what we did was to learn how to grow things given the different challenges associated with the climate change, because food security, we are not going to be able to grow our foods because Barbuda is flat. The rainy seasons have changed. The island is very dry. We're prone to drought. So in order for us to continue, we need to be able to produce that food. One of the things that indigenous persons throughout the regions will tell you is that the local indigenous knowledge is a science which has allowed us to cope. And at my school, where agricultural science is the focus, we have tried to pioneer technologies which will understand, first of all, those growing techniques which were used by peoples of the past and modify them to suit. So for example, something like aquaponics, where you're using minimum amount of water under controlled conditions, you're able to produce food, plants, as well as protein in the form of fish. One lesson learned from our experience going through that is that it only takes one hurricane, no electricity, and then systems are falling out. So the lessons we have learned from that, we now have to use the abundant sunshine that we have out there in terms of alternative energy. So our systems going forward now will be linked to solar panels generating energy. We are using hydroponics and aquaponics, which we can quickly dismantle ahead of a storm and reassemble after a storm. So within 2 weeks, we can get back to food production. And these are the things that we are pushing. We also have a fight on our hands in terms of maintaining our land ownership system, communal ownership. And I was very pleased to have the opportunity to discuss and meet my brothers and sisters in Puerto Rico, El Caño Martin, Peña, in terms of some of the things they're doing with regards to their land ownership system. And the message I want to put out there is that throughout the region, our knowledge in terms of how to produce food, the traditional knowledge, it has value. We also have to safeguard our control of resources, because one of the things in terms of environmental management that we learned from long ago is those persons who are using the resources, who depends on the resources for livelihoods, they are the ones who should have control. The day we go down the road where land becomes a commodity to be bought and sold, we are faced with people in this world. I call them the philanthro-capitalists. They pretend to be philanthropists, but what they do is to use the monetary wealth that they have to gain control of the resources. So for example, in Abacos, Bahamas, they have a luxury community, and the land system essentially was not under the control of those persons who lived in the settlement in the thing. And who got the worst hit in terms of the hurricane? The rich, wealthy homeowners, they're able to fly out ahead of a storm, but the workers that lived in the settlement in the mud, they were trapped, and the casualties there were tremendous. The same in Puerto Rico. And what we're facing is a wave of disaster capitalists who are now working to further erode our control, our sovereignty in terms of ownership and control of those resources. We have to be aware of it, and we have to fight to prevent that. And we also have to develop systems using the technology and the abundance of energy that we have in the region to modify our food production systems so that we can be secure and therefore continue our lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mussington. You tell us there are historic reivindications in the Caribbean that are very important. Food security is related with ownership, with communal land ownership. Climate justice is possible with a food security related with local traditional knowledge. This has value. This has to be recognized. And we are going to talk about the techniques and the lessons from traditional knowledge and what are you doing in each part to produce different possibilities in this absence of, I imagine that in your island also, of huge tourism and intervention of people from outside. So gaining control is very important in this, as you say, wave of capitalist disaster. Well, now I'm going to give the word to Graybern Livingston from San Andrés, Archipiélago de San Andrés y Providencia, Colombia, which is also part of a youth organization that has been working to help recover food security, recover memories of the traditional racial people from San Andrés, and to look for the real solutions for this climate crisis, or as we can say, the civilizational crisis. So please, Mr. Graybern Livingston, tell us what's happening in San Andrés right now and Providencia, if you can. Tell us about your collective work and what's happening now with the food access for the people, for the race of people. What's happening with water issues? Is there any human rights issue? I imagine there are. And what health issues are being related with COVID? How communities are responding to this new civilization wave crisis? Thank you for coming.
Hello, everyone. I want to give thanks to all your send a greetings to all the partners and panelists here in this first webinar that we are carrying through. San Andres and Providence is a very complex situation right now because the whole islands are completely locked down. We don't have any connections, any flights. We only have foods that they bring for us from the mainland in Colombia. And we are passing through a very difficult moment here in San Andres because the whole economy looks like it's going to broke down. We don't have or the main economic development here in San Andres is based on tourism. So we don't have any tourists, and it looks like it's going to happen or it's going to extend on to next year, maybe the first part of next year, or maybe in summer next year. So the government is really concerned of these issues, and they are trying to do what they can to solve the situation. But from community base, the Racial Council is trying to fight for the rights of the racial people in order to guarantee food access, because for the last days we have seen that the access to food has been very limited for a lot of people here in San Andres. So we are trying to move on to see from the Racial Council, from our organization, how can we implement programs or carry through programs that can help solve the situation of the food security and food sovereignty here in San Andres. I want to give some information about historical information about San Andres from the early 50s with the establishment of tourism. We have been lost in farming and agriculture in San Andres. In the early 2000s, we could see that the 60% of farming was lost, and that all our people had moved on to a model of tourism where they are totally dependent of this model. So the economy based on tourism had somehow wiped out agriculture of San Andres. Today we have a few farmers that continue the job, continue to farm, but this is not sufficient to guarantee food security and food sovereignty for the islands. The importation of food is reaching up to 95%. We totally depend on the importation of food from Colombia mainland and from the south part of the United States. We have a lot of problems in our diets. We have a lot of sickness that come from the foods that we are consuming, that they are not totally healthy, or they are not guaranteeing the nutrition that the people need here in San Andres. They have a friend that's saying that the food that we import is like dying cells, that they are not guaranteeing the nutrition of the people. So in this sense, we as organization, we are trying to fight back in this global crisis that we are facing, in order to invite people to let us plant again, let us use our spaces, our yards, our lands, and our territory to start make San Andres what it was before, because in the past we was very autonomous in our food supplies, and we also was autonomous in the decision that we made on our territory. So right now we are very aware of what can be happening. We don't know how long this global crisis is going to take. We don't know if the national government has enough food supply to guarantee the food security of the people here in San Andres. So we are right here trying to figure out from the community base what can be done in order to help us pass through this crisis that is affecting us in all the dimension of life, from the social, the environmental, and economically specifically. And water access is critical in San Andres. We are passing through a dry season, a drought that maybe it will end in a month on two. We really don't know. The climate has been changing for the last years. Climate change has affect a lot of farmers and agriculture businesses. But we believe the government has been taking a lot of truck with water to the communities in order that they can have to be sanitized and to wash their hands. But is definitely not sufficient for what is going on here in San Andres. A lot of community don't have water. Every week we see a lot of blocking and protests in the roads, in the principal or the main roads here in San Andres, where people are exacting the local government to guarantee their rights to access to water and to also to food. The food that they are sending from the mainland isn't sufficient to guarantee the food access to the people back here in San Andres. There's a lot of issues right now. Yesterday, a few days ago, we a group of farmers sent a letter to the local government exacting at least 10 points for farmers, exacting them to guarantee the rights of peasants and farmers here in San Andres. We exact the access to water specifically so we can produce food, and also the recognition of the ancestral agriculture food system of the rice people as a way to face the new crisis, because it is a way on is an accumulation of knowledge that we have been constructing for a lot of time, and that is right now is the moment and is the call to both to the people and the local government that they can recover and recognize this knowledge as something very important to face the crisis. So we are waiting for an answer from the local government. We want to sit down with the local government so we can design strategies and public policies in order to guarantee the future sobriety and security here back in San Andres. In the fishing level, we see a lot of people has been fishing in and doing fishery, like a farm to sustain their families, because like the tourism has been being stopped for the moment. So I believe we have more access to seafood or to sea resources to sustain our family. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people that don't got access to these resources. So they are really passing hunger right now in San Andres. I just want to say that this crisis had, for the whole Caribbean and maybe for the whole world, is it made visible all structural problems that this capitalism and this modern society has in the bottom. Maybe this crisis didn't happen, maybe we not been making this deep reflection around the importance of food back here in San Andres. We can see in the social network and in WhatsApp and Facebook and Twitter that the people from the island is calling for a movement, a local food movement, in order to recover our local knowledge around agriculture, but also to guarantee the food sovereignty and security in our islands. I believe San Andres will be in a very, very vulnerable position for the next 2 or 3 years. As I said before, the economy of our island based on tourism, and that will really, really be affected, or one of the most affected dimension in this global crisis that we are coming through. Further on, I expect to share some strategies with our brother and sister from the Caribbean, based on solidarity and maybe in comunalidad, as we say it in Spanish. So we as together we can face this crisis, reconnecting our territories and exchanging our knowledge. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Graybern. There are really a lot of problems that are, as you say, structural, and maybe we can talk later about dispossession of land in San Andres. And there are also some local leaders from Providencia, All Providence, that wanted also to participate. And we will do more webinars on this, because this the idea is to have here an exchange of voices from the people that are suffering and also proposing the solutions. I want to present everybody to Pambana Bassett. She is from Harare and New York City, an organizer based in New Orleans, who joins struggles for food sovereignty, reparations, and collective tenure for Black and Indigenous people in the Americas and the African diaspora. Pambana is going to help us with the questions, redirecting the questions to each one of you in this first part of our webinar. Thanks, Pambana, for being here.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of the presenters thus far from across the Caribbean. And we have some other attendees. I've been looking at the chat, a lot of representation from Belize, and I'm sure on YouTube, where many people are live streaming, there are folks tuning in from all over. So we have a volunteer convener of the Caribbean Regional Network of Women, made up of 150 organizations and group, primarily of rural women in the Caribbean and farmers. We have the Belize Grassroots Youth Empowerment Association that has reclaimed 1,200 acres of land and is now working on modeling how to develop an acre of land with the syndicate and a cooperative model of land development. The Belize Assembly for People with Diverse Abilities, which is a disabled persons organization, and an umbrella organization in Belize, an urban planner, as well as somebody tuning in from the UK who wants to make connections with the Caribbean. So thus far, our presenters have covered a great breadth of some of the major topics and themes that are coming from the grassroots at this time. Before COVID-19, the Food and Agriculture Organization, which largely accompanies grassroots and campesino movements, shared that over 840 million people experience hunger. And it is from places like Jamaica, Puerto Rico, Belize, Barbuda, Colombia, that people are offering incredible examples of how to, from the grassroots, organize. So our presenters have talked about the dire situation that the Caribbean experiences in terms of climate change and disaster, but also the solutions and opportunities. In Puerto Rico, the people who are organizing for protective gear, but also to unseat governments that don't address the needs of the most vulnerable. In Belize, a presentation that talked about the importance of recuperating medicinal plants and foods, and how critical non-governmental organizations have been in making sure that people have their needs met. An impassioned presentation from Barbuda, which provides an incredible example in the Caribbean of a land that's both collectively held and titled and also governed with youth and leadership through a model of of land not being for sale, but being for the use of people to grow food, to commune with our ancestors, and to ensure that people don't suffer hunger as they are today. Puerto Rico has a similar communal land trust. I'm hoping in the first question that the two youth from Puerto Rico can start us off. In Colombia, we heard about the challenges of tourism as the primary model of development. and how the people of Krystal are fighting against capitalist models and a model of modern society that's based on single economies like tourism or plantations, and instead recuperating ancestral agricultural food systems and indigenous knowledge, which is something that is shared from all of the farmers who spoke today. Going to our first question, and we have had some questions also in the text box. If people have questions, comments, please share them. This will be, to start us off, if the two youth from Puerto Rico could share with us. You spoke about the challenge of supermarkets. You talked about demonstrations for dignified life. What are some of the specific proposals that your organization is putting forth in the time of COVID and in organizing against hunger and food insecurity? What models of land access and land distributions are your proposals for a life with dignity in the Caribbean? So that is Krystal, and there you are, sis.
Hello.
Buenas tardes, gracias por compartir.
So in our communities, we have a land trust, as you say, because we believe that communities should stay here because we were the first one to get here, and we don't want gentrification or displacement to get along with our communities, because we are the workers, we are the people who are getting the struggle of all the days, and it's not fair that some other people like rich people or other people come here and take advantage of our works. So, and in other teams or organization is working to identify those families who are in need and to bring food to the tables to that families. And also we are doing that with getting the food from our local farmers. So we are supporting our local people so we can bring food to our communities. And I hope my partner Chris Maury can talk about what we are facing with all children and all proposal for food to our children.
Yeah. Yes, no. Okay. Aló, ¿me escucho?
Yes.
Sí. Okay, my bad. Okay. Well, in that part, for example, we managed to get our school cafeteria. I'm not gonna say this as if it was something easy or something that has been done since day one, right? Because basically, when the governor was gonna get, when she was gonna have to answer her questions, like the questions in court, that's when she just said, yeah, let's open school cafeterias, because initially she had said flat out no, right? We didn't know why. And we also have various different projects like throughout the island, right? We already have this mini grid with other communities, other organizations, right? For example, we have some people that do routes around the islands, around different kinds of farms, and bring all that produce down to the city area, área metropolitana, right? But we should balance this out, right? Because we do what we can as citizens, but that doesn't mean we have to do everything, that there is to do, right? The government basically just said that this issue about hunger is on us, right? So here's where we get the conflict, right? Because before yesterday, we had a companion of another organization, I think it's Comedores Solidario or something like that, right? Where they managed to get produce, rice, beans, food, and all that, and cook it and prepare it to give out for people that can't afford food or simply, are not in good times right now. But the problem with that is that that person got arrested, So we basically trying to solve our problems in the ways we can, but they're not letting us anyway, right? Another example, we once, for a little while, we had the issue with cars, right? Where one car could go out this day, one car couldn't go out another day, right? But then there was a person that went out on his bike to get local products, and he also got detained, right? So it's kind of messed up that there's kind of stretching all this pressure on us while they keep saying that they'll do this and that. They send an email, they just give a press conference where they don't really answer anything, right? So we do have movements and stuff going on for us, but it's still a hard process, right? I don't know what else to put into that. No sé qué más ponerle ahí.
So yeah, and we also, our government heard from the organization that they have to open the school cafeterias, and they take the food from the school cafeterias and gave it to some communities organization, but half of that food was expired. So what are you trying to say, that the communities have to take the responsibility and you're trying to help, but are you really helping us, or are you just letting the people, the country die?
Thank you so much for that presentation. These two youth are part of a pretty precedent-setting example of communally held land, and in the island of Puerto Rico, which is denied its sovereignty by the United States of America, and where the island has successfully ousted governmental leaders for corruption, while simultaneously advancing grassroots alternatives. And it's a travesty that you're experiencing food insecurity and governments providing expired foods. But you certainly are giving an example both in the legal realm and land access realm of how young people can protect lands from colonial legacies. Thank you. On that note, of proposals primarily from Black and Indigenous communities. Andy Chuc, are you able to share with us, you began speaking about the importance of medicinal plants, how at a time like this of a global pandemic, it's clear that there needs to be a return to ancestral practices. Do you have specific proposals in your country of Belize and more generally for the Caribbean for how to return to Maya ancestral practices to ensure that people have food and dignity?
Yes, based on my experience at my home, right? We have certain foods like makal. I do not know the name in English, but apart from that, we have medicinal plants. And I think that the reconnection with our ancestors is reconnecting with the land, which will make us less dependent and also economically, because sharing something that one of my elders of my village, Mr. Andrés Yama, said, nature provided everything in what they wanted, provided food, provided medicine, provided homes also, and provided a spiritual connection. So I have seen the rebirth, I can say, of people having little gardens at their house, having tomatoes, having pepper, different kind of food. Why? Because a part of making you more dependent of of the system, it helps you to save money also. But I believe that there is an importance for us to re-educate ourselves in the ancestral knowledge, because that's the only way we'll survive a what if. And I think COVID-19 have showed us how vulnerable we have become, how dependent we have become on a system. And to give you a small little history of my village, everyone were farmers. There was no money. If you wanted something, you exchange it with food. 1950s, everything changed. Sugarcane, there was a sugarcane boom. Everybody started to plant sugarcane. People started to see the good things of it. Roads were being built, schools, people were educating their children. But this came with a cost of an educational system which is colonized and make us forget who we are, make us forget of living from the land, and we became dependent on a system that everybody wants to be on a tie working in an office, nobody wants to plant. So there is a challenge, for example, in my community, a mental challenge to decolonize that, and that idea that a farmer is like the lowest rank in society, because there's still this kind of mentality. Everybody wants to be an office worker. Nobody wants to plant. So I believe that, and we need to reconnect with our ancestry, reconnect with our history. In, in my community, name is San Pablo, and I have to say that majority of the people are cane farmers. So they depend on the global sugar market. They are not dependent. There are really few people that continue to plant. Before this COVID-19, um, my father, he have a little land on the bush where he continued planting. So he got all the land, his crops, and brought it home. So I can say that we we who plant, we have around for a month more um, food compared to other people. So I believe that right now we are seeing the importance of planting, the importance of reconnecting with the knowledge that is becoming lost due to 500 years of colonialism, 500 years that is not only physically, but also the hardest part is the mental part, because I believe that we need to start to plant and start live. If we do not have land, we can still do it at the small space that we have at home. That is a start. Because I know I cannot speak for every community in Belize, because the reality of different communities is different. But the one that I see, for example, in my community of San Pablo, we have a good space where we can plant. We have a good space where we can um, put medicinal plants. And I know that there are a lot of people that are doing it, but not everyone. But in this COVID-19, I believe that the best way of defeating it is not only one person, but as a family and as a community. If you don't have food, share it. If you have seeds, share it with your neighbor to make it plant. Because everything starts with idea. So
Thank you. Thank you so much. Along with that line of everybody going back to the land and planting, in the chat group, a number of people have asked about alternatives. What do we do with the existing structure, which is IMF loans, encouraging people to, particularly in the Caribbean, to import food instead of grow food? What do we do about this current oil crisis, where it's become very clear that the world can function and can actually thrive without a complete dependence on oil and extraction? In Jamaica, I know that Hugh Johnson, you've been part of a number of initiatives. You mentioned that in the past you met resistance from the government to encourage people to farm and to use fertile lands for farming and not for other developments. Could you speak a little bit about the alternatives that you're proposing in Jamaica as farmers to an economic model that is based on oil and extraction and not on ensuring that people have their food needs met?
Thank you. As it relates to that pointed question you have asked, and we have been at it for some time, even before COVID, the farmers of Bernard Lodge, which comprises the property is about 30,000 acres. Farmers, we have been farming on that land for the last 20 years. It used to be a sugar plantation, and it was converted into smallholding farmers. Government decided that they want to convert that area into housing development. And the sad part of it is that those who were charged with the responsibility to effect that project, unceremoniously ejected the farmers from the land without seeing about their welfare or providing suitable alternative space for them. After our outcry, we call on the opposition, we call on the government. They acceded to our request and, as promised, to relocate these farmers, which the displacement has happened over 2 years now, and even to date, only about 25% of the farmers have been relocated. There's still another 75% to be relocated. And the sad part about it is we all see, because of climate change, the adverse effect on food production as it relates to the drought. That area of Jamaica is the best irrigated landmass in the country. And you are proposing to dig up billions of dollars worth of irrigation investment infrastructure to plant concrete. And we are saying no to that. You need to rethink that. And even though they have promised to adequately relocate the farmers, it is not happening because where they are proposing to put the farmers, there's no irrigation infrastructure there. And at this time, they cannot afford that irrigation infrastructure. So there's a lot of issue at play, and there's no tangible work on the ground. What we get is a lot of promises, and we see it as a three-card trick, and we are saying we'll have none of it at this juncture. As it relates to the the nutraceutical area that you have spoken of, fortunately for us in Jamaica, the government has established years ago a pharmaceutical industry council, which is actively looking on those nutraceutical, how to commercialize them and to get them in a usable form to help the populace. Most of those challenges that other countries speak of, we in Jamaica, we are fortunate to have policies, programs in place to address them. The unfortunate thing about that is that most of those programs, policies, technocrats that have been entrusted with the responsibility to enable that to happen, they are more of a hindrance than a facilitator. That is the challenge we're having here. But nonetheless, food security is of great importance to us. And as it relates to their thought process of not properly thinking out these projects, it is jeopardizing our food security. And I still believe that without food security, there can be no national security.
Great. Thank you so much for that intervention. Speaking of food security is tied to national security, or in general, the well-being of the majorities, the working class, the Black, the Indigenous, the women, the people with diverse abilities. We're very curious what the situation is in Colombia, where a number of Black and Indigenous organizations have taken on a proactive response to COVID-19, trading goods and services amongst each other, working together in the face of state violence. Could you speak to the situation in San Andrés, particularly what your long-term strategies are, working as farmers and fisher folks with young people? What would you like to see for your communities, and how should that be an example to all of the Caribbean desde San Andrés?
Hi, Pambana, how are you?
Greetings, Graybern.
Okay, San Andrés, well, San Andrés is we are trying to, like I said before, recover or ancestral practice around farming and fishing. Today we can see that the majority of um, young people, they are not interested in working or farming or fishing. They are more like linked to the tourism and all these different type of economy that is built around it. So we from our organization, we start a campaign, we start a short campaign to invite the young people and people, the racial people in general, to start farming. Farming to recover our autonomy and our food security. But we are designing a strategy that we have a three-level work that we want to bring forth. We have a family. We have to start work with the family in order to recover the values of farming, start encourage them to farm so they can use the yards, the front yards, backyards. They can also apply urban farming if they want, organic farming. We have a community level where we want to use spaces that they're not using, that people has abandoned for years, use it in order to create like a collective farming society or collective um, community farming in order that we can the people can access space, because even though San Andres after the early 50s up to the 70s we had more than the 100% of the lands back here, the racial people, we have been lost in losing the land by the advance of the tourism and the capitalism model of development. So we right now, racial people have something like 34% still remain in their hands, but there are a lot of families, racial families, and black communities here in San Andreas that don't have access to land. So in our community level, we want to give them the opportunity to can start farming in these lands that they are available and that they're not in use in this moment. And we have a third level, which is the defense of our ecosystem, especially the our maritime territories or our beaches and so on. We want to work in not just a policy, but a strategy from the occupation of these spaces in order to guarantee our rights on it. Because from tourism start, we see how little by little we have been displaced from these places, especially beaches and territories, keys and maritime territories. We don't have the fishermen don't have a lot of access to places fishing in, because they have to be competing with other people from all over the world that come to our biosphere reserve and extract our maritime resources. So the idea is also to strengthen these organizations in order that they can is that the government to have specific rights to use these territories and use this is marine resources. Um, we dream of an island that could be totally green again, where we can find fruits and vegetables and people farming all over our land like it was before. Even when I was small, I had the opportunity. When I was a kid, I had the opportunity to see what was agriculture in San Andres. Today, we have to all we it is a crisis that is so strong that we have to bring coconut from other countries in the Caribbean, where we in the early 19th, 18th century, we was one of the we used to export something like 18 million coconut to the United States. So we as young people are reflecting over these issues, and we are trying to design an integral strategy in order to guarantee our food sovereignty and our food security, and also link it to the black communities, indigenous communities from Colombia, where they have a long fight that they have been doing for a long time. I know that they presented to the to the president and to the government, and they presented a document in order to guarantee the rights of the peasant in Colombia and for the indigenous and black community. So we are fighting for autonomy, because controlling our food system, farming our own food, farming what we have here and fishing in these islands is what is where we can find our real autonomy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Graybern, for that contribution of both the grassroots strategies of recuperating practices and also providing a front or resistance to a model that is purely based on extracting resources from your community. It's great to hear that young people are engaged. We all know that across the Caribbean, a region that is faces the worst impacts of climate change, is still reeling from colonial legacies. Most of our economies were built primarily for plantations and for tourism to be exported elsewhere, primarily to the US and to Europe. And so ours are communities, Black and Indigenous, that are attempting to reclaim our lands and to change plantations and transform them into lands and territories that are for the benefit of our people, and places in which we can practice ancestral cultural practices as well as governance, which brings us to Barbuda, which Mr. Mussington shared is the sister island of Antigua and Barbuda, which has a specific example of a communally held land that's also governed through a popular process of the people of your island. And you've engaged in some dialogue in the chat group about your legal strategies and how it is that you're fighting in the face of disaster capitalism to keep your lands in the hands of the people. Could you share with us a little bit about how Barbuda is using actual land tenure practices? How are you ensuring that your land is legally protected as communally held? And what does the day-to-day look like as people in Barbuda who collectively decide the destiny of your lands? And sorry, Mr. Mussington, before you begin, just a quick note that CREM Radio is live streaming. It might be CREM Television as well, with JC Arzu as the technician. And we also have folks who called in from Guyana as well as from the US. Listeners on the chat group have expressed a lot of interest in alternatives and indigenous technologies and knowledge, and in collective and cooperative farming, which it sounds like in Barbuda, you're practicing in action, not just in word.
Yes, thank you, Pambana. From the Barbuda perspective, what I want everyone to appreciate is that we are starting, as you said, from a system where the land is communally owned legally. Unfortunately, disasters were used to try to change that. And the reason it is being changed is so that a model of development can be pursued, which is more based on tourism. And in order for that to happen, real estate sales. And so we are at a situation now we are fighting it. We have taken the government to court in terms of the repeal of our Land Act, and we're going forward like that. Now, strategies in terms of what needs to happen. More than anything else, people need to be aware. Awareness must be built up throughout the region. And that can only start with the youth. So I love what Puerto Rico is doing, and I love what is going on in Colombia that Graybern has mentioned, and Hugh in Jamaica, because Jamaica now is facing, and I like the phraseology which Hugh is using. You're plowing the land to plant concrete. And that essentially is what we're facing throughout the region, the conversion of our resources to these development models based on real estate sales and so on, which eventually will land us in problems. So awareness is important. In Barbuda, what I'm fortunate in that I'm an educator as well, I'm principal of the school. And so we have designed an agricultural science program where we not only teach the theory of agricultural science, but the school operates a farm. The farm has components of poultry production, eggs, as well as broilers. We also have crops and fruit tree production. So the students are taught not just the theory of farming, but the practical aspects of it. So just recently, we have moved from a position where all our eggs had to be imported. And over a 2-year period, led by the school and our program, we were able to transform Barbuda from a net importer of eggs to having all the eggs consumed in Barbuda coming from 2 producers, essentially, the school and the local farmers cooperative. So what we're doing is showing the young people that farming is not something that is for persons who cannot achieve much academically. But in today's world, it is critical in terms of food security, because food security is life. And if you do not control your food production, if you do not get back to that aspect of depending on yourselves, you're going to be in trouble. So strategy going forward is to engage the youth and show them the practical aspects of doing that. You also have to make sure that for those countries that do not have the communal system, the model practiced in Puerto Rico, for example, it is instructive for people to look at what is happening there, and in terms of their local communities, organize in such a way to make sure that you adopt those models so that you can go forward in that way. Because the fact of the matter is the climate crisis is here with us. We're going to be suffering in the region. And unless we move away from the oil which is causing it, and to get back to our local traditional knowledge and to engage our young people in showing them how they can become resilient in terms of using these methods. And the other recommendation I would have to make, in addition to engaging the youth, showing them what to do, let us adopt the alternative energy strategies. We have a wealth of energy in the region. In fact, our region built up Britain and the West through that period of enslavement, because sugar production was based essentially on alternative energy, wind energy, and we need to get back to that. So those are some of the strategies that I would want to share: engage the youth and use the technology in terms of rationalizing the traditional knowledge and how best to go forward to build adaptability.
Thank you so much. And we've had a note that because we have such wonderful speakers from across so many different territories, we're going to move into wrapping up and just ask for each presenter to share a few words in closing that might offer a solution for how we can move out of one crisis to the next into a world that is based on popular dignity and popular process and land rights for all, particularly marginalized Black and Indigenous communities. And just a quick note, we at the top of the webinar did recognize today is Labor's Day or May Day. Thank you to all the workers of the world, to the peasant farmers, particularly thank you to Mr. Richard Leach, who helped coordinate the logistics of this webinar, and to all who are tuning in. It's the workers of the world, the poor in the cities, in the rural areas, who make this world turn, and COVID has certainly proven that. That it's from our labor that the world's economies are able to run, and our communities are cared for. Workers' unions are who have fought for weekends, who have fought for benefits, who have worked for compensation when people are injured, maternal and paternity care. And it's a beautiful and brilliant day to celebrate the workers of the world, including these farmers who are on the front lines, both in being most attacked and in the chat group, somebody mentioned forcibly disappeared, assassinated. The peasant farmers of the Americas are leaders who are, are in great risk because they are challenging the status quo and offering an alternative that is truly meaningful and, protects the future generations. If we could just start giving some closing words. I believe the folks from Puerto Rico could start, Krystal and Chris Mauri. If you could just share perhaps 1 minute of a kind of call to action. What would you like to see most in these times of crisis as farmers, as land-based organizers and human rights defenders for the future of the Caribbean? Krystal?
So I wanted to say that I know that it's hard, and especially here in Puerto Rico, because we're a colony, and it's hard to go against the government and all this big power. But I believe that youth people and the community leaders are the ones that have all the power, because as you say, we are the essential workers here in this crisis. We are the ones that fight every day. And I just believe that we have to keep educating everyone that we can, keep involving the youth people, and maybe in some countries that you don't have a lot of youth people present, you can um, involve them, that making them see that they are part of this movement, they are part of the land. So just keep in the hard work.
Some quick, but going on with that same line, another thing we tend to do sometimes is like when the problem comes up and the solvent and the solution works too, like by the time the problem goes by, those same solutions also go, right? So instead of like adapting to the situation and just leaving it at that, we should basically like restructure the whole situation. So for the next crisis, we already have a good base, you know, so we want to be that setback for the next crisis. Whatever it is, I hope it doesn't come that soon, but yeah, we shouldn't drop like all our efforts just because things have calmed down, right? Like right now is like the best excuse to prove that all of this actually works and how things should be working too. So I think that would be all I would have to say for now. Thanks.
Thank you. If we could hear from Jamaica, what do you propose for a life with dignity? What would you like to see as a farmer offering a solution for food sovereignty and against food insecurity?
Thank you. In going forward, I would want to say here as a wake-up call and as a call for action, we see the land grab, the displacement of indigenous people and small farmers as a great injustice and a threat to our food security. So we see these as wrong, and all that needs to happen for evil to continue to triumph is for good people to keep quiet. So I'm imploring my group of friends here, let us speak out and try and endeavor to achieve the 3 objectives that I've asked for in our coming together to collaborate with those corporations that are on hunt in this land grab, collaborate more with government, and to end up with a policy document that can outline the role and responsibility of each of us and make it also punishable if it is violated. Thank you all, and may we continue to press for a worthy cause.
Thank you so much. We need policy change, we need systemic change. This crisis has made clear that the capitalist model, racism, white supremacy, the various legacies of colonialism must be overturned, and that it's actually the farmers and the workers who have the power to do so. In Belize, a country that has a long history of struggle including some precedent-setting land rights cases of the Maya, Mopan, and Kekshi in the south. Many struggles for dignity in Harmonyville, where people are planting, and up north, the Yucatec Maya, where you're recuperating practices. Andy, Chuc, do you have some closing words and calls to action for us?
Hello. I believe that this COVID-19 is a moment of seeing not just the negative things, but the positive things that sometimes we take for granted. And what we take for granted is the ancestral knowledge of our grandparents, that sometimes because of certain reason or another, we ignore it. And let's not wait for the government to do everything for us. We can do it as a family, as a community, and let's always be ready. And I will say it again, plant in your house if you can't. Let's be dependent, and may God bless everyone. It's been a pleasure being here.
Thank you so much for reminding us that many of the ways and alternatives that we're speaking to are ones that are already exist and are practiced by our elders and our communities, and that we just must recuperate them and strengthen them, and to do so across borders and across different territories as Black, Indigenous peoples, as peasant farmers, as workers. We now go to Colombia, where Graybern, we're asking you to share some words and some of your wisdom on the future. What does this moment call on us to do as people who want a more just world?
Well, I believe, I really believe that first we have to organize. Second, we have to farm ourselves in our ancestral knowledge to recover them. And second, we have to mobilize in order to guarantee our dreams and our autonomy. And I also believe the young people are the one that they are called to make all these mobilizations and change in this world. Through a regional solidarity perspective, because we can't take, the only way to decolonize this system is to work from a solidarity perspective and to engage the youth to start to think critically what we are facing and starting to create solutions from the bottom up. So my words are for the young people that are listening to this webinar, or that they are going to listen to this webinar, that we have to organize ourselves in order to guarantee the autonomy and the rights of our people.
Thank you so much for those powerful words. Certainly, we need the knowledge, but we also need collective action and to work together. The gains of the labor movement have been won because people came together and made demands. And although this is a time of great grieving and mourning for our people who have passed, and for the dangers we face with militarization and quarantine, and not being permitted to work and make an income and to move about freely, it's important that we continue to organize, as the Zapatistas say, with dignified rage. So thank you so much to our presenters from the Caribbean, a land that has experienced both the worst of colonialism, enslavement, and genocide, but also has provided a birthplace of freedom, justice, of organizing with mutual reciprocity and autonomy. And we're so grateful for all of the presenters today. In the interest of the logistics of how we recuperate and redistribute resources from universities and big funds, Jessica Paddock will share a little bit about the history of this project and what our intentions are as people who seek to accompany and support the real solution makers of our time, the farmers and the peasants and the fisher folk of the Caribbean. So I'll turn it over to Jessica. And again, thank you so much to the presenters today. Decolonization and organizing for dignity. Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me? I hope you can hear me well. Great. Thank you, everyone. This has been a really important moment to begin this process of sharing knowledge, and this webinar sort of marks the beginning of this bigger project where we have some funding from the Global Challenges Research Fund in order to support the organization, the struggle that across the Caribbean. So these funds are very much there for you all to use, and we are here to support that. And that's what this project provides, a kind of architecture to enable that to happen, we hope. And so to do that, you know, as we've heard so much today about struggles, but also sort of the hope that we have to be able to resist the dispossession of land, of resources, and the kind of the structural sort of shape of these forms of oppression, and holding on to land and rights to land where we have them. So going sort of ahead, for now, because of the COVID-19 situation, our original plan to have 5 workshops hosted by each of the community sort of partners represented today. These 5 workshops were due to take place over the next year, but perhaps next year we will have the chance to meet, and we hope many even of these organizations, but sort of attendees, will get in touch and become part of this network and potentially part of those workshops as well. But for now, we're using these online platforms to get the conversation going. And for those of you listening or perhaps can't see the slide, you can reach us on Facebook. If you search Food, Land and Climate Justice in the Caribbean, you'll be able to reach us there, but also via Gmail, if our email address is foodlandclimatejustice, all one word, @gmail.com. And we really hope to hear from you, to continue the conversation. And as I say, this is just a starting point, and we hope to use, well, we plan to use the resources at our disposal over the next 2 years to support the struggle for food justice and climate justice in the Caribbean. So thank you so much for making today possible and for sharing experiences.
Great, thank you so much, Jessica. And just to let folks know, we have been taking note of your questions, your comments, and your questions, comments, and yes. And so we will move them over to future discussions and webinars. And in the chat group, it's been shared that we have a Facebook page, and also there is a Twitter. And again, our deepest gratitude to everyone who presented, everybody who tuned in. There were some people sharing strategies in the chat group for how to work for food, land, and climate justice and reparations. And we hope that you have a really beautiful May Day, power to the workers of the world. And we will be in touch.